this is again like this to me is, and I love when Graham Hancock talks about this, like the war on consciousness, because it's a war on consciousness. Everything that we do that's been sacred and like kind of sacramental and like held through time as important is involving some form of change of state, right? And we've been doing that for so long, and only recently have we gone into this societal structure that really tightly channels our ability to explore our own consciousness, like really restricts it into a very kind of reinforced corridor of perception everyone has to agree on and participate in. And that's not been the normal state of play for humanity for, thousands of years. So I think that we're in like a kind of like a renaissance period, and what Terence McKenna would call the archaic revival of bringing some of these things back from the ancient past. It's happening more now than ever, like psychedelics coming back into play. All of these things are starting to resurface is really important. So I'm hopeful for lessons of the past coming back now.
You're right. I mean, in this country, obviously, it's easy to see. If you didn't follow the news, use the internet, basically, like you'd probably think, well, psychedelics are completely illegal. We're never going to see them because they are in this country. Yeah. Whereas in America, obviously, you've got states legalizing them. There's people taking DMT out of vape pens. Mm-hmm. Like, you can go and visit the machine elves for any day of the night legally, yeah? Any time of the day or night, sorry. And like, that's insane. Like, the concept that you could get like a 16-year-old sat in his bedroom, gets hold of a DMT pen and just takes DMT a few times a week. It's like, and becomes a little Timothy Leary before he's even turned 18, yeah? And comes out and says, I've literally sat in the room with God. And like, these are wild times that's okay, obviously not for a 16-year-old.
Well, do you remember that video? I think it was from like the 1950s or 60s. It was like a black and white video of a kid who had been taking LSD, and his mom was really worried about it, and they were talking to the doctors. Dude,
yeah.
Right? I mean, like, I feel so sorry for that kid, because he's just like, no, like God is everything. Like, I understand now that, and she's like, he's talking crazy. I just don't understand what we have to do. Like, and the doctor's like, well, he's clearly lost his mind, and it's just like,
it's totally making sense, isn't it? He's like talking absolute sense. Right? It's like
he's making so much sense, and you just sit there like, bro, was in the wrong time, but not ready for that knowledge.
I think that before you used the drug, you were afraid of people?
Well, I didn't know it at the time, but I realized that I was when I took the drug, because it brings out your inner feelings more intensely.
And why do you think you were afraid of them before?
Because I didn't know them.
Do you feel that you do know them through the drug?
No, I don't feel that I know them, but I'm not afraid of being rejected by them. Because I don't feel any rejection towards them. I used to be constantly thinking about being afraid of them, but now I don't have to be afraid anymore, because they're all beautiful, and whether they reject me or not, they're still beautiful.
Does it ever seem to you that this may be a little unreal?
Oh, yes. But I mean, after you learn this on an acid trip, you practice it when you're straight, too.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't leave you.
If everybody is beautiful, then there's no one who's, say, dangerous to you.
Oh, but the dangerous people are beautiful, too. They're dangerous, sure, but they're still beautiful.
Why are you here?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to break it down in short. I found God, and I made me feel quite good, and my mother mistook this good feeling for taking drugs, and I was getting kind of wayward and everything. I mean, I wasn't coming home on time, so she phoned the police, and I was brought to YGC, and then I was brought here. Because of my talking about God and everything, they might have thought that I was a little crazy.
Do you think you are?
No. But I understand how they felt, because I wasn't making myself clear on it. It's very hard to... I was trying to express something that was hard to express, and I wasn't really capable of expressing it. I mean, I can have the relationship between myself and God, but it's a mistake to try to make other people feel the way I did, and that's what I was trying to do.
I can't describe to you the feeling that it gives you when your son says to you, can't you feel it? God is everywhere. I'm going with God. I'm waiting for God to come and get me. it isn't a happy thing at all, or an insight. It's a death wish. And I tried talking sense to him. I said, Jimmy, you don't see God till you die. But he couldn't see that at all. He believed that he was seeing it right now.
You know, it's like, oh man, it's like that Bill Hicks sketch. You know,
yeah,
where he talks about the kid on LSD. If the news was talking about positive stories and positive drug stories, it's like, you know, a kid on LSD realized that we're all just slow vibrational atomic frequencies coherently interact with each other in an infinite cascade of universal consciousness. Now here's Tom with the weather. Like, that would be such a nice world to live in, right?
Well, I think that's why it was banned, man. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, at some point, there was a collective effort to everybody be like, we can't have people waking up, right? Yeah. We can't have people challenging what our paradigm is.
You had the Vietnam War, and you know, there was so much going on in that time period where the government didn't want a counterculture, so it was just like, it was bound to happen, right? This propaganda war against it in the 60s and 70s, and then it just propagated on from there. You know?
Well, that's another thing that if you look at it from the other side, I mean, Jean-Luc, you've done research into this too, is that the CIA basically created the whole hippie movement and the whole counterculture movement, right? But they also, on the same part of that, were trying to use all of those psychogenetic drugs for a weapon, right? For mind control or for truth serum or shit like that. And they were doing that publicly. I mean, it's the famous story. They gave LSD to one of these guys, and he jumped out of the window, and
it was Frank Olson, or it was one. He was working with them as well. You know?
Yeah, and then they lied to his family forever, and then after like 40 years or something, they finally came back and said, "Oh yeah, well we dosed him, and he didn't know, and he killed himself. So sorry about that." Yeah, that was like 40 years later. His kids grew up, like this bullshit. So it's like, and then they were just handing LSD to Timothy Leary so that he would hand it out. There's videos that have come out recently of him with a bunch of other people and the CIA, like talking about all this shit back then, right, when it was all going on. So
like, I know there's leveraging it for like MK Ultra and things like this, but what trying to fuel a counterculture movement, or is the counterculture movement just a kind of escape from the lab consequence that they didn't expect, where it's pulled out into society?
I think they flooded it. Like there was, one of the little offshoots of the Mellon family dedicated a mansion to these hippies, right? And Timothy Leary would swing by and just dose everyone with acid. Yeah? We've seen any of that?
Seriously?
Yeah. You don't know about that? One of the Mellons, who was a bit of a hippie, he ended up being a big supporter of Timothy Leary and those guys. And he had basically they donated a mansion to the movement, which, big old grand building, like a beautiful American house, and painted with Buddhas all over it, the Philosopher's Stone logo and all that stuff. And they all did their hippie thing there, took loads of acid, and I think that the guy coming out of that was manufacturing a ton of it as well. And it was a big thing, and it was like the start of the counterculture. It was like really pushing it, yeah. And but meanwhile, I think that a big part of what was going on from the spooks' point of view was that you had a very febrile society where it was like you got lots of wars going on. You got Vietnam, and there's people who essentially it's like, we're going to have a revolution in this country if we don't change the way people think and quickly. Mm-hmm. So they changed it to flower power as opposed to gunpowder, I suppose. So it was like, it got to the point where people just going, well, if we do our sit-ins and we protest and we take loads of acid and we have our festivals and we put pressure on society that way and become the counterculture, it's better than them turning into like a military operation and starting a civil war, isn't it?
Yeah, so like almost kind of counter to the government's intentions in foreign policy in Vietnam, the CIA's bigger picture of like, well, we need to actually maintain civility within our own homeland, so we've got to fuel counterculture, like a pseudo counterculture movement.
Mm-hmm.
So that people have the feeling that they're fighting the power when really we're reinforcing it, but we're creating, which is funny because that's happening today in so many different ways.
Well, it is, because people are, I'm all about the peace and love, man. Like, genuinely. But like, the more people become passive, the less likely they're ever going to stand up against oppressors. And the peace and love movement's good, but when it's set in an environment of an oppressive society, it is purely just a movement for yourself to make yourself feel better, really. Because, you know, like, we're still governed by people that aren't peace and love and aren't children of the flowers, and, like, you know, they aren't about that. They allow us to be if we want to be.
How comfortable is your peace and love when it's won through blood and war?